presentations. Two voices that ostensibly seem different, but as a matter of fact, the way I read them, they share the same concerns and the same aspirations for a better, more dignified humanity. Also, nothing is more true than this juxtaposition between just war theory and jihad, which in this case, if you look at also the rules of qital or the principles of qital and not necessarily jihad, you will see a lot of commonalities between the jurisprudential principles behind qital and the principles of just war theory. As one excellent scholar has put it when he was comparing between the concerns of Catholics and the concerns of Muslims in the contemporary world, he described them as, that was the title of his piece, "Our differences are the same." Our differences are the same. We share a lot in common. If you look at the example that His Eminence gave about the principle of just war theory, the issue of necessity, that war has to be a necessity and not an after all peaceful means have been exhausted, the existence of a legitimate authority to carry out war, the concept of proportionality, avoiding innocent civilians, and I may add also heeding any call for peace. These are some of the principles of war and non-aggression, of course. These are some of the principles behind the concept of qital in Islam, and as you see, again, the differences are the same. And actually, the excellent scholar's name, to his credit, is Scott Appleby. I'm sure is very known to you, and also to Dr. Tariq Ramadan. Now the floor is yours. You heard two stimulating presentations, so you can come up with also stimulating questions. If I just would like to, if I may impress on you, please state your name, your affiliation, and to try to state your comment in the form of a question. For the sake of and try to make it brief so we can entertain as many questions as possible. Because I'm sure many of you would have queries and also clarifications that would like to get from our respected speakers. So the floor is yours now. Yes.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, Izzat النمر, a writer. I hope my question is not going to be too long, but I'm going to try to cover some of the issues that have been talked about. We have an issue that is very dangerous indeed. So deviation for an individual can be dangerous, and what is more dangerous is the deviation or deviance of the elite or the systems. But the deviance that cannot be accepted is one of the religious institutions. In case religious institutions deviate, so once they deviate from their message, it becomes a catastrophe, because these are the basis, because they have to rectify any issues and put people on the right track. I have a question that I would like to ask to the Church or to the Vatican. Maybe the Vatican have freedom of movement, of resolution. And unfortunately, our religious institutions might be maybe restricted because they are under the upper hand of our regimes. My question is to His Eminence, the Bishop. You mentioned a number of points. You talked about the 11th of September as if it is a truth, a reality. It is not a reality. There are some people who are still trying to understand whether it was a made-up case or a real case. And talking about terrorism, there should be a definition of the term terrorism. politicians should come up with a definition for terrorism, let alone when it comes to the different religious institutions. We should not just try to spread it, talk about it in one instance, and also try to link it to a religious message. The war on terrorism, is it a real war? Is what Russia doing in Syria, is it a war on terrorism? Is what is taking place in other places a war on terrorism? Another question, are there people who are making terrorism to benefit from it? Some people say that Daesh is made up by certain entities because they want to make the best of it. So this is very important indeed. So the other point, this is your fifth question. All my interventions, they fall within the same question. When we talk about the term authorities, what was the Vatican's position vis-à-vis the killing of Regini? Those who killed Regini was a power, an authority, and not an individual person. There are millions of people similar to Regini in Syria and Egypt and so on and so forth. This is a point that is worthy of reflection. You talked about self-defense. What is the position of the message with regard to resistance in Palestine? Last point. This is your third last point that you mentioned so far. You talked about the United Nations. Does the United Nations represent truth or justice? Yesterday, we have seen one of the UN agency's directors, because the Secretary General of the UN asked her to withdraw one of the UN reports because it condemns Israel.
شكرا جزيلا. يا دكتور طارق.
Please, Dr. Tariq Ramadan, help me for us to be able to answer these questions. Thank you so much.
Obviously, you are, by listening to what I have shared with you, it is not exhaustive, and therefore it has a very specific finality for me to help you, since by the fact that I am a Catholic, to put to you how we have reconsidered the concept of conflict, the concept of war, of legitimate defense, and so on. But the real issue is linked to I am a religious leader. So I'm not really responsible for dealing with political issues as a religious leader. The only thing I may tell you, to respond to some of the questions you raised of a kind of political character from what you understood from my presentation, I cannot really respond to you. The only thing I may tell you is that, well, the Vatican has always exercised a major role in reconciling communities, in reconciling groups, by the fact of being, let us say, independent, or let us say, always remaining on the edge of what is the different politics exercised by different governments. So in respect for that, also many governments, they rely on the Vatican authorities to mediate in order to exercise a kind of moral authority. So in that context, policies and diplomacy are very helpful to contribute in building a better world by promoting any initiative that may lead to peace. I normally say that peace has a twin sister, and this is called justice. So we cannot understand peace without justice. There are many injustices today in the world. Many of our evils are coming because of an increasing process of inequalities that are making people more suffering, more poorer, among the poorest, and this is raising, as Dr. Tariq Ramadan has stressed at the end, the suffering of the people, and that is really at the origin of future conflicts, unless we really try to promote a better. Now, I don't know exactly from any other details you have given of political character, because I don't have any responsibility as a religious leader. I am promoting interreligious dialogue, so as a religious leader, I promote dialogue among religious leaders. The only thing I may tell you from my personal experience is that today there is a necessity to combine and to bring in together politicians with religious leaders, listening to each other in order to collaborate and to contribute between these two different fields of life, of our human reality, without any interference, in a very harmonious way. So there is a necessity for this. But for this also we need the necessity for education. And in this context, we have to educate the educators. We have to educate the educators, because many of our evils are coming from educators. We have to educate people. Somebody was telling me recently, I would like to see somebody, a political leader like Pope Francis, like saying he's so fine in responding with his life, with his witness, and receiving this moral authority given by people, not only Christians, but Muslims, and belonging to other religious traditions, people of goodwill, for what he says. And people telling me, I would like to have and to see politicians decidedly resolute to solve conflicts in a kind way. Pope Francis is acting as a moral authority, not only for Christians, but for the entire world. So I think that always it remains that today we are living in dark moment of our history. There is a real wounded humanity. We have to act in such a way that this is something very urgent. For this I told you how timely the subject is for us and for everybody to promote the education, because it is through education that we could really one day say, well, you know, we are brothers and sisters, we are all together building society, we are struggling to promote the common good. And we should discuss, as I told once to one of my Muslim friends, you know, we should not discuss one in front of the other, a Christian or a Muslim, but we have to stand one next to the other, shoulder to shoulder, walking together and trying to answer and to collaborate to change our world and to say a word with authority so that things may change. So let us avoid any kind of confrontation, beginning from ourselves, from within our communities, and may our witness and what we do be extended to every person of goodwill for the transformation of our world. But let us not forget that many of our evils unfortunately, are coming from the educators who are the first to be educated. Thank you.